actually, just kind of a note about my mother. First, because you've got me thinking about my mom, who is not here tonight physically. She's passed away many years ago, but I have to tell you, I'm certain she's here with me and with us, and that's to all of our benefits. She was a wonderful, wonderful woman. Maybe just a note quickly about how it is I wound up here, because it's an odd series of coincidences, no question. I bumped into Jeff at Panera here in Park Ridge earlier this summer, and that's odd from a lot of different standpoints. I don't live in Park Ridge anymore. I haven't for a couple of years, so I'm not in Park Ridge very often. I don't go to Paneras. I'm a Starbucks guy. I had to meet somebody. Oddly enough, I was meeting a golfer friend of ours who wanted to give me a gift, and he insisted we meet at Paneras. So I was sitting there after my other friend had left, and I was doing some work on my laptop, and Jeff was sitting at this table next to me, and we used to spend a lot of time together. And I think you were visiting with somebody else who was going to do one of these talks, and after she left, you noticed me sitting there. So Jeff came over to my table, and he asked me, "What have you been doing?" And that's a dangerous question, really, to ask me, because I've been involved in some unusual things by anybody's estimation, I suppose. So I honestly don't know how it is that of all the things I could have said to you that have been going on, we wound up talking about my daughter, who passed away 21 years ago. But it came up in conversation, and Jeff asked me if I had seen Tom Swoboda's talk. Tom is well known to most of you, I'm sure. And I said, "No, I don't know what you're talking about." And he said, "Well, here, let me use your laptop." And so he turned it around and put on the videotape from Tom's talk here 2 years ago. I had not seen it. Tom was talking about a transitional point in his life, and it involved the day that my daughter was hit by a car and died. And Tom was the first one on the scene. He went on to describe, this is my story, not Tom, so I won't go too much into it, but Tom went on to talk about it, that as a kind of a jumping off point for a career change that he decided to get involved in within the police department. But it was kind of ironic, because I heard things and learned things about that day from the video that I didn't know, and I was shaken up. I don't go there very often, I'll be honest with you. I don't. I find it very difficult to even think about that day, but it was an important thing for me to learn about. And Tom said something that I'm going to use here. I'll paraphrase, but he said that the things that he was going to talk about that night were likely to get emotional. And that he said, and I'm going to say to you, that if that happens here tonight, I'm okay with it, and hopefully you'll be okay with it. These things are difficult, but they're part of life, and if there's one thing I have been learning through adversity and blessings that are all part of life, and that is that sometimes we just have to pray for acceptance. Oftentimes there are no real answers to some of these hard things that come our way. And I consider myself fortunate that I haven't been asking that question. I think that you're really on thin ice if you start asking why things like that happen. There's a wonderful book called When Bad Things Happen to Good People. Most people misread it. They think it's why bad things happen to good people. And I think anyone who starts asking that question is really, they're likely to not have a satisfactory answer. The real question is when bad things happen, and that is, what is your response? So, long preamble, I'm sorry I got off on that tangent. I'll tell you the story that Jeff asked me to share with you tonight. And Jeff referred to some of the things I've been involved in lately, and I'm going to blame this guy sitting back here, my friend Ed. I hadn't seen Ed for a couple of years. We've been friends for over 30 years, but for whatever reason, we hadn't seen each other for a while, back in 2006, and I said, what have you been up to? And he tells me, oh, I was running a race in the Sahara Desert. And I said, oh, really? And he gave me some of the more he told me, the more crazy it sounded. It was 150 some miles. It lasted 6 or 7 days. It was self-sufficient, meaning you've got to carry everything on your back that you need to survive for a week in the desert. And I'm sure there were other things but I zoned out. I stopped listening. I thought it was crazy. But I couldn't get it out of my head. I know within a few days I called that up. I said, how did you do it? And that started me down this slippery slope. And a year later, I was on the starting line of the Marathon Des Sables in the Sahara. And I ran that race. And just to prove how goofy I am, I went back the next year with Ed. We both ran it. Then I felt the need to go back a third time. And it was my third experience out there that I want to share with you. Now, these races and many of the other ones that people like Ed and I get involved in are extreme by any account. There's no question, and I'm not suggesting that it's sane behavior. Really, but it's something many of us enjoy. Some things are more or less likely to happen, it seems to me, in these events, but I also think a big part of it has to do with the setting. Deserts are special places as far as I'm concerned. In fact, there is even some context for this, I think, within our religious framework. I'm a reader of Thomas Merton, and in his New Seeds of Contemplation, he suggests that we go out to the desert not to distance ourselves from our fellow, not to isolate ourselves, but to find ways to be of service to our fellows. And I understand that he meant it somehow in a metaphorical sense, but I also think there's quite a literal connection to what happens to us in deserts. They are the vastness of them and the quiet or the stars at night. There's something very special about deserts from my perspective. And when one goes out and then pushes physical limits and mental limits and in fact spiritual limits at the same time, then it's been my experience that almost a portal can open up and new insights can be arrived at. So I was out there for the third time in this event, and I had some personal goals. Most of us don't have any hope of winning a race like this. There are some incredible athletes who can run circles around me, and but I did have a personal goal. I wanted to finish in the top 200 of this race, and I had missed by a little bit the first year, and then in that second year when I was back out there with Ed, I got sick and I missed by a lot. So the third year I was out there, there was actually a flood in the Sahara Desert. So kind of no locusts, none of the other plagues, but there was a flood in the desert, and it changed the entire orientation of this race, and it wound up causing them to alternate certain stages. And so my race strategy changed along with it. And not to get into too much of the detail, I'll just point out that I was, it was the last day of the race, and I knew that I had a chance to achieve my goal, which is really kind of an arbitrary one to begin with, but it was causing me to try to handle the race in a certain way that day. And it basically meant that I was going to be pushing quite a bit harder than I was used to in normal circumstances. And there was a point early on in this race where I was already exhausted. I had, it was I think a 26 mile stage, and I remember telling Jeff this. It was kind of odd because I was so annoyed in the middle of the race because there's normally a lot of French running in this race, partly because it's close to the Moroccan Sahara, and Morocco was a French colony until very recently. So there's a lot of French, and they tend to stick together, and they aren't that crazy about the American runners, myself included. And I remember getting physically jostled during the course of this stage, and by a group of these guys who passed through and knocked me off stride. And I was really resentful of this, and I'm sure that for miles I was hanging on to this, and it's an interesting thing how God works in our lives, because I was, while hanging on to these thoughts and being more angry than anything else, I wound up pressing on into the race, and at a point of near exhaustion, I found myself pretty much alone, which is very unusual. There's about 1,000 runners in this race, and you're usually within contact of each other, at least a few others. But I was literally alone in the desert, and from a point of feeling tremendous physical and mental exhaustion, I had this overwhelming sensation and experience where all of the fatigue and all of the pain and all of the sensation of difficulty that I was struggling with, which is all predictable stuff, I was expecting that, left me. And it was replaced by this sense of well-being that was literally all-encompassing. Not only was I no longer fatigued or in pain, I was actually in a near euphoric state, and I knew intuitively that it was God that was, I was about to say with me, but that doesn't quite capture. I mean, many times I've tried in my own thoughts to capture so that I could explain what this was like. The closest thing I can use to describe it is that rather than having God with me or me with God, this was a question of simultaneously encompassing the same space at the same time. I felt like we were really in one unit, and for that instant, I was, by any account, that's a shocking experience. I mean, I had never had anything like this happen to me before. And I remember saying out loud, stay with me. And instantaneous with those words coming out of my mouth, my daughter was then with me in the three of us now, same place, same time. Of course, this is an extraordinary experience for somebody who's, anybody, I guess, but certainly for someone who struggled with the loss of that individual. What I found most remarkable about it was, I can't tell you how many times I wondered about the conversation I'd like to have with Emily if she was back, to see how she was doing, or how old are you now? Do you get older? Not a single one of those questions even occurred to me in this situation. They couldn't have been more insignificant or immaterial. I knew through and through that she was wonderful, and of course, this is exactly the answer that I would have wanted had I thought to ask it. She was perfect. I couldn't have described what she looked like, or what she, how the time passes, if there even is such a thing as time where she is, but I knew, and I was reassured, and I was really in a wonderful state because of that. I don't know how much time passed, to be perfectly honest. I was moving. I know the miles were going by, and I was continuing on in this race. And then at some point, I did sense that this sense of God and this sense of my daughter had kind of slid aside a little bit. And then the physical sensations, the mental fatigue, all those things started to creep back in, and I was struggling again to finish my race. However, of course, I had been changed forever. Once an experience like that happens, that kind of informs everything after that. The experience that was central to everything had come and it had gone, and I still had a race to finish, so I was out there struggling mightily, and I still had a goal, and I knew that I was close. I knew that if I could hang in there and keep running hard, I would probably finish in the top 200, which I was hoping for. And still angry at the French in general and some individual Frenchmen in particular. So, this race, the way the finish line happened to be this year, we came off of literally off of a mountain, and down on the plain in the distance you could see a long flat area where the last stage was going, and then the finish line. So I could see where the end was. I knew exactly how far I had to go, and I knew that I was on empty, literally. I didn't have anything left. So I got down the side of this mountain, and I had every intention of walking to the finish line, which was about 2.5 miles away. And I was on a 2-track. Somebody had driven an army truck, so I was running or walking along one of these tire tracks, and coming alongside on the other one, somebody came up to me and he grabbed me by the arm and he says, "Come on, we're going to finish this together. We're gonna finish strong." And I had never seen this fellow in my life, and as you probably already guessed, he was a Frenchman. So I said, "I can't. I have nothing." And he said, "Yes, you can. You can finish." And I said, "Well, then, if we start this, we're gonna finish it together." And he said, "You bet." So we took off, and I was breathing like a locomotive. I was really, my heart was coming out of my chest. I was really, really, really struggling. And he was much younger than me. But we kept together. We finished arm in arm. I got a picture of this guy back at my place, and sure enough, thanks in large part to him pushing me, I think, I did make my goal, and it was very satisfying to finish where I wanted to. But of course, that had very little to do with this little life lesson that I was given there, which of course was, don't you dare generalize, you know. This was guy just kind of before he checked out there, giving me one last message, one little practical insight that said, "Hey, you know, you were pretty quick to judge all these guys, and you know what? They're not all like that, and maybe none of them are like that. Maybe you shouldn't be so hard on other people." And a lesson worth learning.
Now, could you elaborate on the thread of love through your whole journey since that time and onward?
Well,
where does it stack up in your book?
You know, I mentioned earlier that I tried not to dwell on the sense of loss or and to instead try to draw from some of the more positive aspects of life. I would say I don't even know how I arrived at that state of mind, but it does allow for. I think you're blocked to love if you get stuck on loss and pain and tragedy and negative things, and you don't have to look hard to find something to be upset about in life. I mean, there's a lot of adversity out there. So I guess the message that it was kind of resounding for me, and you know what, I'll go maybe full circle back to my mom. I grew up in a loving household. My folks were incredibly supportive and loving, and they really got me started with the right state of mind, I think. I draw from those experiences, and I think that was instrumental in helping me to not get on a wrong track, maybe, and to keep positive and keep love central to things.
Thank you.
I'm not sure if that answered your question. Okay. Sure.
How long did this race take altogether?
Well, it took a week, but you don't run straight through. These are stage races, so you run a distance from a start to a finish, and then you camp at night, and you take your stuff out of your backpack, and then the next morning you run again and again and again. So that kind of race, it's called a self-supported stage race, usually takes a week. some of these races we will run are different from that. They're nonstop. There's one that we've run in Death Valley that is 135 miles nonstop, and that one takes 34 hours and 35 hours. And that one's a challenge. That one is, the National Geographic 2 years ago gave a list of the top 10 toughest races of any sort in the world, and the Marathon Des Sables, the one I was describing in the Sahara, was number 2 on their list, and then this one in Death Valley is considered number 1. So, difficult. Your shoes melt. Yes?
You have to carry a backpack while you...
That one, yeah, the self-supported race, everything you need to survive for a week, food, clothing, sleeping bag on your back, with the exception of water, which gets rationed at aid stations.
How much is the backpack?
1,000 pounds.
Yeah. Ed's answer is correct. I was going to lie and say 22 pounds on the first day and maybe 12 at the end. Feels like 1,000.
Yeah.
Yes? Question? No?
You sponsor, or now you sponsor extreme sports or something like that.
Yes, I do.
Did you have anything to do with that guy who just jumped out of the...
No, that's really crazy.
Oh, okay.
I just, Ed is a partner of mine on races. We have some races this coming weekend up in Lake County and Des Plaines River Trail. But I have a partnership out west, and we just finished the first self-supported stage race in North America was 2 weeks ago, from the north rim of the Grand Canyon to Bryce Canyon. So that's one of my businesses. So yes,
That's the most, when I hear extreme sports, I'm thinking, so what's the craziest one you've done? Or been a part of? Not necessarily participated in, but...
Well, the ones we participate in are crazier than the ones we put on. So
okay.
Yeah, I think Badwater, the one in Death Valley, is by all accounts the toughest of them all.
Okay.
It's hot, 130 plus degrees. They cook an egg on the road before you start, and then you run. Your shoes melt. It's so hot, literally. So it's difficult. Anyone else? Okay.
Thanks, Terry.
Is that all right?
You did a great job, Terry.